Now, welcome everybody. I'm going to mute everybody. So Rabbi and Rabbi, please unmute. And it's great to see everyone. We'll be running this morning. Afterwards, there is the dedication of our butterfly garden. I may have one or two announcements at the end for other programs I'm running, including next week, Sunday, is music with Rabbi Jay. And now I'm going to spotlight Rabbi Mafik. Take it away.
Oh, it is wonderful to see all of you, and especially wonderful to welcome my friend and great teacher, Rabbi Alan Scher, to our community. For many of you, Rabbi Scher is no stranger. He was an interim rabbi at Legacy Lakeside, which I did not know, and that is tremendous. And perhaps even more importantly, his grandson became a bar mitzvah at our congregation, a wonderful grandson. And Rabbi Scher was there. I was there too. And it was just an honor. And, you know, the interesting thing is, I've known about Rabbi Scher for a long time because of his really pioneering work in interfaith relationships. And now there's, when people talk about interfaith life, there's sort of two aspects to it. There's the sort of organizational level, you know, the chief rabbi meets with the archbishop and all that. And that's great. That's important, you know, all to that. But the real important work comes in the personal relationships between rabbis and priests and ministers who are in the pews, who are in communities doing the work. And Rabbi Scher really pioneered an extraordinary friendship with a priest, and really it's all documented in a wonderful film about Old St. Pat's Church. It's Father John Cusick, and they're very close friends. And that relationship was unique and wonderful and inspiring to me and to my wife, Ari, who also does interfaith work. And so I knew about Rabbi Scher from that. But then when his grandson became a bar mitzvah, I learned about his extraordinary history in civil rights activism. So in some ways, you know, sometimes people, there's a lot of conventional rabbis, people who do things the same way. And then there are rabbis who kind of think differently and do pioneering things. And Rabbi Scher thought differently in terms of civil rights. There weren't that, you know, now we take for granted that the reform movement is committed to social justice. But when Rabbi Scher went to St. Augustine, you know, more than 50 years ago, the number was in the teens of the number of rabbis who went. So it was truly pioneering and different and took a lot of courage. And so it is my honor to welcome Rabbi Scher to our community. And I am excited as everyone to hear some stories and get some inspiration. Rabbi Scher?
Boy, Evan, wow. You read exactly what my mother wrote you to say.
It's true. It's true. Thank you.
I have a history with both congregations. Also, Evan, I don't even know if you know this, way back when, in my Chicago days, I was a fill-in at Solel as well in the days before Dove Taylor.
I didn't know that.
That was way back, and then Lakeside.
Wow.
And then, of course, the great joy, the simcha of being a part of my grandson Eli's bar mitzvah. This was now 2 years ago.
Yeah, so, that was wonderful.
I insist on telling these stories for what I think is a pretty positive reason, that it's first person story. It's a story that you don't read in a history book. It's a story that I went through. And I've tried very hard to tell this story as often as I can while I'm still able. And so I'm so glad that Evan and Vanessa asked me if I would appear this morning. Thank you all for being a part of this. So here's the story. And in order perchance to understand the story, I need to take you back to the days when I was a little kid. I grew up in small town USA, in a steel town north of Pittsburgh, Butler, Pennsylvania. And from my earliest remembrances, I can recall having my head busted open with a rock, and on the back end of the rock was the shout, "Jew bastard." Uh, uh, it was anti-Semitism was rife. I was the only Jew in my high school class. And so I faced this all my entire life. And the best moment that I can recall to exemplify what I'm talking about is that I was a good golfer as a kid, a pretty damn good golfer. And when it came time to play on the golf team, which was my great excitement, I was told I couldn't because the country club where the team played was restricted, no Jews allowed. And many of you, as I can see on the screen, remember those days from way back when. What it did for me was make me see how important it was to live a life fighting for civil rights. My parents gave me that background, by the way, by insisting. A good example that I can recall as a kid is that somebody put down the fellow who was collecting garbage, and my parents went berserk with the person who made this statement. And that burns indelibly. So now the story, but so that you have an idea of my background. I was a young rabbi. And when I say young rabbi, I still had hair. That's how young a rabbi I was. The year is 1962. I am about to assume my first congregation, Massapequa, Long Island. My wife and I came to the town about 3 weeks early, just so we could get settled. 2 days or so after we moved into our house, I got a phone call, and I imagine it was from Southern Christian Leadership, but I don't remember exactly, that there was extreme segregation in Albany, Georgia. Would I join a group of rabbis and ministers making the second of the Freedom Rider trips to Albany, Georgia? Dr. King had been incarcerated about 2 weeks before for, I believe, a week's period of time. And King was asking for the clergy to come and demonstrate. We talked it over, and I don't think we hesitated for any more than 1:30 seconds that I packed my bag. And the next day, I joined a group of rabbis and ministers in a church in Harlem. We decided we were going to drive to Georgia rather than a bus. This is 1962. The famous Freedom Rider buses was 1961. And we decided to drive rather than a bus. If you remember, the buses were stopped, the buses were burned, and the passengers beaten within an inch of their life. We decided to drive, and that was a cautious drive as well, because in August, a car from up north in the south is suspicious. This is not December and a car heading for Florida. So, but we drove. In our case, we were 4 clergy in the car. I only remember the driver. He was the Hillel director at Yale. And I don't remember who the other 2 occupants were. We drove to Georgia, drove to Albany, were met in a church by Dr. King and his associates, Ralph Abernathy and Andy Young. And King spent the time telling us what was passive resistance and how to do passive resistance. He warned us that we could be beaten. He also warned us that we would be jailed. We then went to homes where we were put up in homes in the Black neighborhood. The next day, we gathered on the steps of Albany City Hall. We were at this time, I believe, about 35 or so ministers, some of whom were from Chicago. The rabbis were all from the New York area, but there were a group of ministers, both white and Black, from all over the country, many from Chicago. We assembled on the steps of the county seat of the courthouse, and we were warned, stopped by Laurie Pritchard was his name. He became famous. Pritchard is mentioned in the film Selma. He said, "You must stop or I will arrest you." And he did warn us. We did not stop and continued the prayer service, and we were arrested. Now, in being arrested, we succeeded in something very strange. We succeeded in integrating the Albany, Georgia jail. For the first night that we were in jail, they didn't realize that they had put white and Black together in a jail cell. By the next morning, they got the message. The next morning, the white ministers, at this stage of the game, I'd say we were 20, 25 or so white ministers. We were shifted and sent to the Baker County Jail. Now, Baker County is the home of Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter had no play in this whatsoever, none, but that's his home seat. We're put in a jail. Now, the jail, you can see how big the room I'm in now is. The jail was 2 cells, much smaller than this room. The 2 cells were meant for 4 people. And here we were, 20 of us in the cells for 4 people. And there was something else that went on in those cells. We had a toilet and we had a sink, but the toilet didn't work and the sink didn't work. And we were in jail for a week. Now imagine spending time in a situation where you need to go to the bathroom, but it bounces right back at you. So that by the time I was released, and by the way, I think I'm still out on bail, but by the time I was released, the detritus from the toilet and the sink was well above my ankles, and well above all of us. It was not a pleasant time, and we were all crowded together. They did absolutely everything they could to annoy us, to hassle us, throwing firecrackers in through the cell windows, sending two drunk blacks into the cell, anything to harass. But after a week, we were let go. And here's a wonderful story for you. I was covered, but covered in lice when I got out of jail. Covered. And as soon as I got out of jail, of course, I called my wife, Nancy, and said, hey, please go to the local drugstore and get some lice powder because we're going to have to clean me up. She did. She went to the druggist and said, I need some lice powder. And the druggist said to her, for your dog? And she was too embarrassed to say no for my husband. So, and so that the first thing we did upon my arrival home was to take care of the lice. Now, did we succeed in Albany? No. At one point, we attempted to get the Albany ministers to join us. That didn't succeed. But did we succeed? Well, here's the way we succeeded. They decided to integrate the library. How did they do that? They took out all the tables and chairs so that you could stand together with a black, you just couldn't sit with them. And that, at that stage of the game, that was it in the sense of integrating. But there's much more to this story. I arrived back in Massapequa, Long Island, a hero. And when I say a hero, the New York Times wrote about us, Time Magazine wrote about us, Life Magazine, the Long Island newspaper, the television stations, the radio station, hero. Our rabbi was a freedom rider. So that my very first sermon, the place was jammed, standing room only. About 2 weeks later, I had a gathering of the youth group in my living room. And a phone call comes from the Long Island Fair Housing Council in the very next town. So, and when I say next town, like Highland Park and Deerfield, literally the next town with no space in between them. In the next town, there was discrimination in a housing development, that they had refused a home to a black couple who was applying. And they wanted to take out an injunction, but the courts were closed. But if they mounted a picket, if they mounted a demonstration, perhaps they could prevent them from selling any more homes. Would I come? Of course I'll come. So then the next statement was, well, all right, if you'll come, can you bring anybody from the congregation? I said, my goodness, I have 14 kids in my living room here. And as we all know, there's nothing more liberal than a teenager. So I went to the kids and I said, told them the story and said, would you like to come with me on a demonstration? And every hand went up. I said, go back home, ask your folks. If your folks say yes, please join me. The next day, 6 kids called and said, my folks say yes, we'll meet you at the temple. And then came the 7th call. The 7th call was from the president of the congregation. And I remember this conversation. as if it were 5 minutes ago. He said, I understand you're going on a demonstration this morning. I said, yes, that's what I'm planning to do. He said, you can't go. What do you mean I can't go? He said, that's not your job. That's not my job. So what is my job? He says, your job is to teach them. Oh, I understand. My job is to teach them. Yes. He said, no. That's not what I mean. Well, what do you mean? He said, your job is to teach them Judaism. Yes, of course that's my job. I understand. He said, no. That's not what I mean. All right. What do you mean? He said, your job is to teach them the difference between right and wrong. Now I understand. I said, I'll tell you what, wild horses aren't going to keep me away from this demonstration. He said, I'll call the 6 kids and tell them they'll have to come on their own, and I will go as Alan Scher. Called the kids, 3 of them did come. The following Friday at Shabbat services, and in those days, the president of the congregation sat up in the pulpit. So the following Friday, it was my turn to speak. And in my sermon, I repeated the conversation with the president. And I said, look, well, we need to make a decision in this congregation. Why'd you hire me? Did you hire me because I played college ball? Did you hire me because I knew all the dances? Or did you hire me to be an influence on your children and on you? I said, if it's the first, then you got the wrong guy. If it's the latter, then you got the right guy. Well, folks, by November, I had already gone to the placement commission and said, it's a bad fit. And it was a bad fit. And so I went at that point, I went as far away as I could. I went to Mexico City from there. So that's the Albany, Georgia. And now I'll tell you St. Augustine, Florida. Oh, no, I missed something. And it's an important. About 2 or 3 months later, the time frame I do not remember, I got a phone call from a family on Long Island. I do not remember the family, but a family. They wanted to honor the 4 clergy from Long Island who had been to Albany, Georgia. Would I come, just I, not wives, would I come to a dinner at their home on a certain date? Of course. So along with the conservative rabbi who had been with us, we were 10 rabbis altogether, along with a conservative rabbi who had been on the journey, and 2 ministers from Long Island. We went to this person's home, and there was a surprise guest. It was King. And so we spent the dinner hour with Martin Luther King. Can I tell you what we talked about? No, I can't. I don't remember because I was so in awe. Picture if you're in a situation such as that with King, if you would remember chapter and verse. I don't. I just remember my jaw dropped down to my chest, and I sat there in awe. So I had met him in Albany, I met them, and I was to meet him on another occasion. The year is 1964. The March on Washington had happened in 1963, the I Have a Dream speech. This is 64. I am at the CCAR convention, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the Reform Rabbis, in Atlantic City. And in Atlantic City, we are about 500 rabbis, I would say, somewhere in there. Rabbi Cy Dresner. And Dresner is the cog, the central force in all the rabbis' happenings. Absolutely all the rabbis, be it Heschel, be it Maurice Eisendrath, or be it me. Rabbi Cy Dresner steps to the pulpit and announces that there is a phone call coming through from Martin Luther King. They put it on the speaker, and King says, I have been jailed in St. Augustine, Florida, for trying to integrate a restaurant. I would like to continue the demonstrations in St. Augustine. Would you rabbis join me? So I immediately grabbed a piece of paper, a clipboard or something, to run around and take names. And Rabbi Moffat referred to this, is that I ran around, and to my utter disappointment, and I tell you my utter, absolute disappointment, all I could get from 500 rabbis was 16. I heard some incredible excuses as to why not. Incredible. My wife's birthday is Thursday. I can't go. I have a board meeting on Tuesday. And the best of it was, no, I can't go, but be sure I'm going to preach about it. So to my disappointment, 16 rabbis, 16 Reform rabbis, and one layman, Al Vorspan, who was the head of the UAHC's Social Justice Committee. This time we did not drive. This time we flew the next day to St. Augustine. I believe it was to Jacksonville from Philadelphia. We flew to Jacksonville, and we were met by Southern Christian leadership members at the airport and by the Klan. Now, they weren't in white sheets, but they were there to mark us. And when we got in the cars, and the Klan followed us from the airport to St. Augustine. We were met in a church, and we were met again by King and Abernathy and Young. Again, King instructed us as to how to face if a cop or someone else comes at you with a club, how to face it. Do not. The extreme suggestion was, do not fight back or they've won. Just passive resistance. Cover your head so you're not beaten within an inch of your life, but passive resistance. And then King says to us, look, we've been on a march for the last 2 weeks. We have marched from here in the Black neighborhood through the white neighborhood to the town square wherein there once was a slave market. And we march to the slave market, we do a prayer service, at the slave market, and then we turn around and walk back. We're going to continue that march this evening. But we want to pre-warn you. Last night on the march, somebody was shot. Now, the state has called up the state of the National Guard, and they'll be along the route. But on the other hand, the National Guard is mostly crackers. So we don't know what's going to happen. We're doing the march. Okay, everyone, we're going outside to line up. So we all went outside to line up. And as things would happen, who would be at the very front of the line? The very first person on the line. One Alan Scher. They paired me up with a young black girl. I'd say she was 25 or so. And then behind us, maybe at least 100 marchers. And the instruction was hold hands and march and sing, like We Shall Overcome, and so on. So we start out through the black neighborhood and we're holding hands and singing. And then we walk through the white neighborhood holding hands and singing, and then to the slave market. Now we walked through the white neighborhood, and it was in the white neighborhood where the shot had happened, because the white neighborhood was lined with trees. And the shooter the night before had climbed up one of the trees and shot down from the trees. Now, picture how very scared I was. Maybe very scared is an understatement. Frightened is a better term. But we marched, and I kept, as I can best recall, I kept looking up the trees as we walked through. We went to the slave market. Now, a number of days before, Andy Young. Now, Andy Young became famous as the mayor of Atlanta and also UN ambassador. But Andy Young, days before, I don't remember how many, on the march had been grabbed and beaten with the inch of his life. Just beaten. But Andy Young kept going. So we did a prayer service in the slave market. We turned around and walked, repeated the route. Again, I'm looking up through the trees. We got back to the church and we were dispersed from the church to black homes. I shared a bed that night with one of the other rabbis. And by the way, of the rabbis, of the 16 rabbis and one layman, there are only 3 of us still alive. Cy Dresner is still alive and living in a nursing home in Jersey. Jerry Goldstein is in Los Angeles, and myself. The others have passed on. The next day, now here's the setup for the next day. At that point in time, there was a law that said any company that had interstate situations could not restrict the place to whites only, must be integrated. Like at that stage of the game, Woolworths, because that had started in Greensboro, North Carolina, many years before. But why Woolworths would be the best example. Or some of you might remember Howard Johnson's. I think there's still Howard Johnson's in Chicago, or there was when I lived there. But if you are interstate, you could not, you must be integrated. So we were divided up, the 17 of us. Some were to go to the local Woolworths. Some were to go to the restaurant at Munson Motor Lodge, because Munson Motor Lodge had lodges in other states. Some were to go to the restaurant at Munson Motor Lodge, but the largest amount of us were to mount a prayer service in the parking lot of Munson Motor Lodge to integrate the lodge itself, not just the restaurant. So we lined up in like a circle, and we were not just, let's say, 12 rabbis in the circle. We were I think maybe altogether about 50 of us, of blacks and whites in the circle in the parking lot. The parking lot was right beside the swimming pool of the Munson Motor Lodge. And while we were in our prayer service, could have been maybe 10 minutes or so into the service, a car pulls up, and out from the car jumps, I believe it was 7 kids, 5 blacks and 2 whites. They're all in bathing suits. They run through the parking lot, leap over a small fence, and leap into the pool. Of course, the pool abandoned, the whites in the pool immediately abandoned. This is June 18, 1964. The whites in the pool immediately get out. Oh my God, there are blacks in the pool. They immediately get out, and the manager of the Munson Motor Lodge is so distressed at blacks being in his pool that he does not know what the hell to do. And what he does is he grabs 2-gallon jugs, 2 large gallon jugs, I'll get it right, of muriatic acid, and pours it into the pool. Now, he doesn't know that muriatic acid, when mixed with water, dilutes, nor does the kids. Vanessa, put up that first photo. His name is James Brock. And there you see him in his right hand, the acid. And there you see 5 of the 7 kids. These kids did not budge. They didn't know that acid dilutes. It was the most courageous thing I have ever seen in my lifetime. They remained there until a cop, still in uniform, with guns on his side, leaps into the pool to push them out. Vanessa, let's put up the video.
1 second here.
Okay.
La, 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 la. Here we go.
And this, you'll see, Munson Motor Lodge. It's now a Hilton, but here's the pool, good old whites, a year before us, and the sweet young belle. Getting ready. Now, this is our moment. And they're literally swimming in the pool, holding hands. And here comes Brock. There goes the cop. And if we had the sound on, you can see, all right, you touch him, buddy, you're in trouble. Here, hit him on the head, knock him. It was not a friendly crowd. And you can see us in the white shirts in the background. That's how close we were to what was going on. And then Brock is saying on the tape, you know, what was I to do? They're trying here. You see with the truncheon or the club trying very hard to hit them over the head. Cy Dresner is there, and in a moment, you'll see Jerry Goldstein right there. Is Jerry Goldstein being arrested and saying, "Keep your hands off of me." That's Dresner. This is us getting arrested. That's a picture again. There's Jerry Goldstein in the front. Now that's, I think, is one of the marches where you can see 2 by 2.
How did you have tape of this? You know, today we have our cell phones. Everyone's a reporter, but how did you have tape of that?
We were covered by every single news outlet in the country was there. Absolutely covered by the news outlet. I'll jump forward and then come back. Including watching this whole thing. This was this was shown live over every television set in the country. Including President Johnson watching this experience, and Johnson saying immediately that he was so moved by what happened there that he pushed to get the 1964 Civil Rights Act passed. I'm really proud that I had a small part in that happening, but he was so moved by that. So then we all got arrested. We were put into cop cars, taken to a huge parking lot near the St. Augustine jail. And in the parking lot, I saw another horrible, horrible scene. Not far from me, 50 yards maybe, was a young girl, a young white girl in a summer dress. One of the cops took an electric kettle prod, turned it on, and shoved it up her. I can still hear the scream. This is almost 60 years later. I can still hear that scream. They arrested us. They put us in jail. Now, this time, the 17 of us had a larger cell. We now had a cell meant for 8 people. It was clean. The toilet worked. The sink worked. The shower worked. Ever tried taking a shower where all you have to dry yourself off are paper towels? But the shower worked. So did the toilet. We decided we were going to be there for some time. And in the middle of the night, the 17 of us said, how should we fill the time? Like it happened in Albany, Georgia, we were on a hunger strike, except for water. But how should we fill the time? Well, after large conversation, we decided, why don't we write about why we did this? Why did we come to St. Augustine? And so one of the people jailed with us was Eugene Borowitz, certainly one of the leading Reformed theologians. So how are we going to write? Well, they took everything from us. We had nothing in our pockets except from one of the guys. He had the stub of a pencil in his pocket. Well, what are we going to write on? We found a poster, and we could write on the back of a poster. It was a Klan poster. How's that for irony? But it was a Klan poster, and we wrote on the back of that a missive that we've titled Why We Went. And I want to put it up, Vanessa, would you please? And I want to read 3 paragraphs to you. There it is. Now, this is the poster as I fancied it, but I'm going to read the 3 paragraphs on the right. We came to St. Augustine mainly because we could not stay away. We could not say no to Martin Luther King, whom we always respected and admired, and whose loyal friends we hope we shall be in the days to come. We could not pass by the opportunity to achieve a moral goal by moral means, a rare modern privilege, which has been the glory of the nonviolent struggle for civil rights. We came because we could not stand silently by our brother's blood. We had done that too many times before. We'd been vocal in our exhortation of others, but the idleness of our hands too often revealed an inner silence, silence at a time when silence has become the unpardonable sin of our time. We came in the hope that the God of us all would accept our small involvement as partial atonement for the many things we wish we had done before and often. We came as Jews who remember the millions of faceless people who stood quietly watching the smoke rise from Hitler's crematorium. We came because we know that second only to silence, the greatest danger to man is a loss of faith in man's capacity to act. Now, all 17 of us had a role. You can take it down now. All 17 of us had a role in writing that. We all contributed something because that was the talk that filled the night. One other event happened during the night, and that was we had a visit from the president of the St. Augustine congregation, screaming at us as to why did we come? Why did we destroy the calm that existed between the residents of the area? Why did we make a fuss? I understand, but I certainly couldn't have agreed with him. So we got out. And again, I believe I'm still on bail. We get out. And so the next logical question to ask from St. Augustine is, did it work? Well, it worked with the Civil Rights Act. In 2014, the community of St. Augustine brought 6 of us who were still alive then, brought 6 of us back to St. Augustine to reminisce. And we got an incredible reception from the town. Did it work? Sort of. The Hilton Garden Inn, which was the Munson Motor Lodge, is integrated. Every restaurant is integrated. But the Black neighborhood is still awful and run down and poor and poverty-stricken. The community of St. Augustine changed its rules for its town assembly, for its town council, is that instead of by areas, they elected the entire town council at large. so that there wouldn't have to, there are only, I think the town is only 18% Black, so that it would be an all-white city council. You have to go all the way down to the Parks Department to find any administrator who was Black. The streets are still absolutely the same as we remember it. The homes are run down as we remember it. But the beach, which was the start along with the restaurants, the beach has been integrated. I went to visit the beach when I was there in 14 and found the Black guy and his daughter on the beach. And I just went over and gave him a big hug and said, I'm so glad to see you, that at least the beach. So that's almost the hour that Vanessa gave me to speak. Vanessa, should we open it for questions or chat?
Right. I actually have a question. How did the Long Island Temple president explain his opposition to you and congregants who wanted to attend the demonstration? And I'm just going to give you the caveat that the president of Macomb Salel Lakeside is listening. He's on this Zoom. So I have some information about how past Temple presidents acted. I can't wait to hear your story.
Mr. Temple president, I don't need your name or I'll pick on you.
Right,
Great.
Ross. It's Ross. You can just call him Ross.
I think the modern day Temple president is not quite as the level of importance that it was 50 years ago.
No, you pull something like that, Mr. President, I'm coming to get you. So he didn't. He never, ever, it's really an interesting question. He never explained. The whole idea there was not in my backyard, that it was okay if I went way down there. That's over. That was okay. You're not messing up anything. But not right here in Massapequa, Long Island. I think the town was Belmore, but I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
So he never did explain. But we were just mismatched.
Yeah. You have certainly brought history alive this morning. I have another question from someone who knew a freedom writer, Diane Nash. Did you ever come across her in your Bob and Babs would like to know?
No.
Okay.
No. I'll tell you, one of these days, I've been doing, I think most of you know, I'm sitting at home in Montana. And in Montana for the past now 13 years, I have been producing the Martin Luther King event here in the town. And we draw 500-600 people in this little town for Martin Luther King. And I have said that this year, if the auditorium is open this year, that what I'd like to do is the women of the civil rights movement, because most often we get just the men. We get Ralph Abernathy and Andy Young, and we don't get the women. So this year, what I'd like to do, if I do it, is to highlight the women. And Diane Nash is one of those women. No, there were some women, some white women in that demonstration in St. Augustine. I don't recall any white women in Albany, but there were some white women in that demonstration. Also to mention, to bring back Cy Dresner again, Dresner was known as King's Rabbi. I was jailed twice, which I think makes me the second most jailed rabbi. Dresner was jailed 7 times.
You know, oh, speaking of women, just to follow up, I don't know if she's on the call because it's her grandson's bar mitzvah. One of our congregants, Barbara Kessler, whose brother lives in Montana, right by you, and I believe you officiated at his wedding.
Right.
Her mother, who was an active member of Legacy Solel, was very involved in fact, went to Jackson, Mississippi to protest. So I know she'd be eager to hear about honoring women. That sounds like an extraordinary event.
Yeah, Barb is right here. Even though she's in DC, she gets
good.
2 gold stars. Well, she and Dennis get 4 gold stars for being here this morning.
Yes, I spoke to Barbara earlier this morning and had dinner with her brother this past Wednesday.
Oh, wonderful. Small world.
Small world.
So here's another good question. How do you feel about the current protest movement?
I am a backer of the protest movement, but not the riots, because I think we're talking 2 different things. In Chicago, the riots have been awful, just awful, but I don't believe they're connected with the protest movement at all. No, I'm not close enough to Chicago to be able to discern the difference. But to me, Black Lives Matter. To me, every life matters. Now, Black Lives Matter protests in Montana.
Oh, Dan is hot.
In our town, there might be 2 families in this little town. In the county, there might be 4 families. Okay. There are more grizzly bears than Jews and blacks combined in this area. Anti-Semitism exists, by the way, in abundance here. The state and the county is very right. And those of you might remember, I said this to Vanessa before, is that Richard Spencer lives here in Whitefish, Montana. And that we had a huge incident, it's now 4 years ago, and that at some time, Evan invited me back to talk about that incident from 4 years ago, and there were 3 families affected. We were one of them from that period of time.
Well, I can speak for Evan, and of course, as you know, I'll be the one to come find you and set a date for you to come back, Rabbi Scher.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Absolutely. You've brought history alive, and I hope that everyone, what an example you have been for us, and to teach our children and to tell these stories and to seek these stories out. We really can't thank you enough. And we're motivated to go on for the rest of the day. You can go to the Butterfly Garden at Macomb Solal Lakeside. Next week is Yiddish Songs with Cantor J. And Wednesday, I have Reading Roundtable that you can just tell me what you're reading. And I have been reading a lot of books by people of color. And I think that's so important as we look at what can we do in 2021. You're getting a lot of kudos in the chat. Rabbi Scher, thank you. Powerful morning. A great morning. You've really set us off. And yeah.
I'd loved it. Thank you.
All right. Well, you'll hear from me this week. We'll set a date for the fall.
Guys, thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Well, It's good to see everyone. I'll see you at Macomb. Be well. Thank you, Rabbi Scher. And if you have anything else, you know where to find me. Bye-bye.